The Catherian Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Their power came from fear, and their fear came from the Shadow Guild. These were not ordinary soldiers or warriors. They were assassins trained from birth to kill without mercy, without failure, and without question. In 3 millennia, no Shadow Guild member had ever failed a mission. The Empire controlled over 200 worlds, across 47 star systems. Kings, presidents, and emperors of countless species bowed to the Catherian throne. They did this not because they loved the Empire, but because they knew what happened to those who refused. The Shadow Guild would come in the night, and by morning, the problem would be solved. Captain Jake Morrison had no idea about any of this when his ship, the Aurora, dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Prime. He was a simple man from Earth, with brown hair and calm blue eyes. He had served in Earth's small space navy for 12 years, but he had never seen anything like the massive space station floating before them. Kepler Prime was a neutral trading post, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Ships from dozens of different species docked there every day. It was supposed to be safe ground where no one fought and everyone could trade in peace. Jake's mission was simple: make contact with the galactic community and establish trade relations for humanity. "Captain," said Dr. Lisa Hayes, looking up from her scanner. She was a tall woman with red hair and green eyes, Earth's best expert on alien life. "I'm reading at least 30 different species on that station. This is incredible." Jake nodded, but he felt nervous. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. They were babies compared to the ancient civilizations out here. "Remember, we're here to make friends, not enemies," he told his crew. "We represent all of humanity. Let's make a good impression." The Aurora docked at Bay 17. Jake put on his best uniform and gathered his diplomatic team. Besides Dr. Hayes, he brought along Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster, a weapons expert with short blonde hair and sharp eyes, and Communications Officer Don Cooper, a quiet man who spoke 7 Earth languages and had been studying alien communication patterns. For months, the station was amazing. The corridors were wide enough for creatures twice as tall as humans. The air smelled strange but breathable. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the halls. Some looked almost human, others were so different that Jake couldn't tell which end was the front. They were escorted to a meeting room where representatives from several species waited. The Altarians looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin. The Centauri were short and stocky with 4 arms. The vegan delegation had scales and moved like reptiles. Everyone seemed curious about the newcomers from Earth. "Welcome to the galactic community," said the Altarian representative, speaking through a translation device. "We are eager to learn about your species." Jake stood up and smiled. "Thank you for this opportunity. Humanity is young compared to your civilizations, but we're eager to learn and to contribute. We come in peace, seeking trade and friendship." The meeting went well. The aliens asked questions about Earth, about human culture, about what humanity could offer the galaxy. Jake answered honestly. Humans were good at many things. They were creative, adaptable, and hardworking. They had art, music, and literature. They had technology that, while not as advanced as some species, was innovative in its own way. What Jake didn't know was that every word was being recorded. Every gesture was being analyzed. In a hidden room deep inside the station, a figure in dark robes watched the proceedings with glowing yellow eyes. This was Vexthal, one of the Shadow Guild's most skilled assassins. He had been sent to study these humans and determine if they posed any threat to the Empire. His conclusion was swift and certain. They were weak. Humans were smaller than most species. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no poison. They seemed soft and fragile. Their captain spoke of peace and friendship like a child. Vexthal had killed beings far more dangerous than these mammals. This would be easy. The Empire's orders were clear. These humans were expanding too quickly. They had to be stopped before they became a problem. The best way to do this was to eliminate their leaders and make an example of their species. Fear would keep the rest in line. That night, Jake returned to his quarters aboard the Aurora. He was tired, but pleased. The meetings had gone better than expected. Several species had expressed interest in trade agreements. Dr. Hayes was excited about the scientific exchange possibilities. It looked like humanity's entry into the galactic community would be smooth. He was wrong. At 0300 hours. Ship's time, Vexthel moved through the Aurora's corridors like a shadow. He had disabled the ship's security systems with technology far beyond human understanding. The crew was asleep, unaware that death walked among them. Vexthel had studied human anatomy. He knew exactly where to strike to kill quickly and silently. He had done this thousands of times before. The only difference was that humans were supposedly even easier to kill than most species. Jake's quarters were at the end of the corridor. Vexel's hand moved to his weapon, a vibroblade that could cut through steel. He activated the door override and stepped inside. The room was dark, but Vexel's eyes could see perfectly. Jake Morrison lay in his bed, apparently asleep. The assassin moved closer, raising his blade. One quick strike, and the human would be dead. Then he would eliminate the other senior officers and leave their bodies as a warning to their species. But as Vexthel brought the blade down, Jake's eyes snapped open. The human moved faster than should have been possible, rolling away from the killing blow. The blade that should have pierced his heart instead cut deep into the mattress. "Intruder alert!" Jake shouted, even as he rolled off the bed and came up in a fighting stance. The ship's alarms began to wail. Vexthel was stunned. No one had ever escaped his opening strike. How had this soft human moved so fast? How had he known? The assassin attacked again, his blade whistling through the air. Jake dodged backward, but the alien was faster. The vibroblade caught him across the ribs, cutting through his sleeping clothes and drawing blood. But Jake didn't fall. He didn't scream. He didn't beg for mercy. Instead, he grabbed a metal chair and swung it at the assassin's head. Vexthel blocked the blow easily, but he was confused. The human should be dead or dying. Instead, he was fighting back. "Captain!" Dr. Hayes burst into the room, followed by Lieutenant Commander Foster. Both women took in the scene instantly, their captain bleeding but standing. Facing an alien assassin with glowing yellow eyes, Foster had her sidearm drawn in a split second. "Drop the weapon," she ordered. Vexthel had never faced multiple opponents in close quarters. His training was for single-target assassination, not pitched battles, but he was still confident. These were just humans. He threw himself at Foster, intending to kill her quickly and then finish the captain. But Amy Foster had trained in combat since she was 16. She had fought in 3 different wars on Earth before joining the Space Navy. When the alien assassin came at her, she didn't freeze or panic. She shot him. The energy bolt caught Vexthel in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed into the wall, his blade flying from his hand. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Dr. Hayes was already scanning the wounded assassin with her medical tricorder. "He's losing blood fast," she reported. "Whatever species he is, he's not healing like he should." Jake picked up the vibroblade, examining it carefully. "This is advanced technology, far beyond anything we have." He looked down at the alien. "Assassin, who sent you? Why did you try to kill me?" Vexthel said nothing, but his yellow eyes were wide with shock. These humans were not what they seemed. They were not the weak, soft creatures he had expected. They were dangerous security. Teams were already sweeping the ship. Don Cooper was at the communications console, sending emergency signals to Earth. The peaceful first contact mission had become something else entirely. As Dr. Hayes worked to save the assassin's life, Jake realized that humanity had just made its first real enemy among the stars. But they had also learned something important. They could fight back. They could win. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when pushed to the edge. The Shadow Guild's 3,000-year streak of perfect missions had just come to an end, and with it the Empire's certainty that fear alone could control the stars. The war between humanity and the galaxy's most feared assassins had begun with a single failed strike in the dark. But it would not end there. The news of Vexthal's failure reached the Shadow Guild's high command within hours. For 3,000 years, no guild member had ever failed a mission. Now, not only had one failed, but he had been captured alive by the very species he was. Meant to eliminate. Guild Master Krellanox stood in the war room of their secret base, his forearms crossed as he studied the reports. The other guild leaders whispered among themselves, their voices filled with disbelief. How could a single human have defeated one of their best assassins? The humans got lucky, said Commander Zextal, his reptilian face twisted with anger. Vexthal was careless. It will not happen again. Krellanox was not so sure. He had lived for over 4 centuries and had never seen a mission report like this one. The humans had not just survived the attack, they had fought back with skill and determination. They had captured a Shadow Guild assassin, something that was supposed to be impossible. We will send a full squad, Krellanox decided. 20 of our best killers. The target is their colony world of New Denver. We will eliminate their leadership there and send a message to the rest of their species. New Denver was humanity's newest colony, located in the Kepler system. It was home to 2 million humans who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars. The planet was beautiful, with blue skies and green forests that reminded the colonists of home. Governor Sam Carter was a big man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a general in Earth's military before taking the job as colonial administrator. He believed in building a peaceful society where humans could thrive, but he also knew that the galaxy was a dangerous place. We've lost contact with the Aurora, reported his aide, a young man named Peter Walsh. The last message we received was about some kind of attack. Sam frowned as he looked at the reports on his desk. 3 days had passed since Captain Morrison's ship had gone silent. That was not like Jake at all. Something was very wrong. Double the security patrols, Sam ordered. And get me Maria Santos. If there's trouble coming, I want our best people ready. Maria Santos was the colony's security chief. She was a small woman with dark hair and quick eyes, but she had earned her position through years of hard work and smart thinking. She had fought in the gang wars of Earth's outer colonies before coming to New Denver, and she knew how to handle dangerous situations. Sir, Maria said as she entered the governor's office, I've been thinking about the Aurora situation. If someone attacked them, we might be next. Sam nodded. My thoughts exactly. What do you recommend? We go underground, Maria said without hesitation. Literally. The old mining tunnels beneath the city are perfect for defense. If someone comes for us, we'll be ready. That night, 20 Shadow Guild assassins landed on New Denver. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, their advanced technology hiding them from human sensors. Each one was a master killer, trained from birth to eliminate targets without being detected. The squad leader, a being called Nexmore, had killed the leaders of 12 different species. He was confident that these humans would be no different from the others. The plan was simple: surround the governor's compound, eliminate all security, and then kill the leadership. By dawn, New Denver would be leaderless and terrified, but Maria Santos had not become security chief by being unprepared. She had sensors hidden throughout the compound, and she had trained her people to respond to any threat. When the assassins approached, she knew they were coming. Governor, she said quietly into her communicator, we have company. 20 contacts, moving fast toward the compound. Sam Carter was already moving toward the hidden entrance to the tunnel system. Are you sure about this, Maria? Trust me, sir. These tunnels are our advantage. Down there were the predators. The assassins struck at midnight. They expected to find sleeping humans, easy targets for their weapons. Instead, they found empty buildings and triggered alarms. The compound was deserted, but the lights were on and doors were open. As if the humans had just vanished, Nexmore was confused. Where had the humans gone? His sensors showed no life signs in the main buildings. Had they fled into the forest? Had they somehow detected the attack? Search the underground levels, he ordered his squad. They must be hiding below. This was exactly what Maria had hoped for. The mining tunnels beneath New Denver were a maze of passages, some natural and some carved by human machines. She knew every inch of them. The assassins did not. Governor Carter and his staff were safe in a deep bunker, but Maria was not with them. She was hunting. Along with 12 of her best security officers, she moved through the tunnels like a wolf pack, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The first assassin died without ever seeing his killer. Maria's team had set traps throughout the tunnel system, hidden explosives, concealed weapons, and carefully placed ambushes. The Shadow Guild members were skilled, but they were fighting on human terms now. "This is impossible," Nexmore whispered to himself as he found the body of another squad member. These humans were not running in fear. They were hunting his people like animals. Officer Tony Mitchell was Maria's second-in-command, a quiet man who had learned to fight in the slums of Earth's megacities. He moved through the tunnels with 3 other officers, picking off the assassins, one by one. The aliens had better technology, but the humans had something more important. They knew the ground. "Squad 7 report?" Nexmore called into his communicator. There was no answer. Half his team was already dead, and he had not even seen the enemy. The Shadow Guild had trained for many things, but not for this. They were used to quick, clean kills in controlled environments. This was a war of attrition in a hostile maze. And the humans were winning. Maria finally showed herself when only 5 assassins remained. She stepped out of the shadows ahead of Nexmore, her weapon aimed at his chest. Behind her, the tunnel was filled with the bodies of his squad members. "You picked the wrong species to mess with," she said calmly. Nexmore raised his own weapon. But Maria was faster. She had been in hundreds of firefights, and she knew how to read an enemy's intentions. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying. "You're going to tell us who sent you," Maria said, as her officers surrounded the wounded assassin. "And then you're going to tell us why." The remaining assassins tried to fight their way out, but it was hopeless. The humans had turned the tunnels into a killing ground. By dawn, only 2 assassins remained alive, both wounded and captured. Governor Carter stood in the tunnel command center looking at the reports. 20 of the galaxy's most feared killers had come to New Denver, and 18 of them were dead. The other 2 were in custody, being questioned by Maria's team. "Sir," Officer Mitchell reported, "the prisoners are talking. They're part of something called the Shadow Guild. They work for the Catherian Empire." Sam nodded grimly. The political situation was worse than he had feared. This was not just random violence, it was a coordinated attack by a galactic power. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them what happened here. And send a copy to Captain Morrison if he's still alive." 3 days later, Commander Rick Davis of the patrol ship Defender was tracking the assassin's escape route through space. His ship was small but fast, designed for reconnaissance and pursuit. Rick was a skilled pilot with brown hair and steady hands, and he had been hunting the alien ship for hours. "Commander," called his sensor operator, "I've got them. They're trying to reach the hyperspace jump point." Rick smiled grimly. "Not today. Target their engines." The Defender's weapons were not as advanced as the alien ships, but Rick had been fighting in space for 8 years. He knew how to use what he had. His missiles struck the assassin ship's engines, crippling it and leaving it drifting in space. The boarding action was quick and brutal. Rick's Marines stormed the alien ship, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they found 2 terrified assassins who surrendered immediately. The Shadow Guild members had never faced humans in space combat before, and they were not prepared for the experience. "Please," one of the assassins begged as Rick stood over him. "We will tell you everything. Just do not kill us." Rick was surprised by the fear in the alien's voice. These were supposed to be the galaxy's most dangerous killers, but they were acting like frightened children. "Start talking," Rick said. "Tell me about the Shadow Guild. Tell me about the Empire. Tell me why you thought you could kill humans without consequences." The interrogation revealed everything. The Shadow Guild's methods, their targets, their plans for humanity. The Empire had decided that humans were a threat that needed to be eliminated, and they had sent their best killers to do the job. But the killers had failed. Not once, but twice. The humans had proven that they were not the weak, soft creatures the Empire had expected. They were predators, and when threatened, they became something far more dangerous than any assassin. Word of the new Denver victory spread quickly through human space. The colonists had not just survived an attack by the galaxy's most feared killers, they had wiped them out almost completely. The message was clear: humanity would not be intimidated. The Shadow Guild's leaders gathered in their secret base, their faces grim as they studied the reports. 2 failed missions. 22 dead assassins. The Shadow Guild's most secret chamber had not been disturbed for 50 years. Deep beneath their fortress on the dark moon of Thanatos, Master Assassin Krelinox walked alone through corridors that few had ever seen. At the end of the passage stood a door marked with symbols that meant "Do not enter." In 17 different languages. Behind that door lived the Shadow Guild's greatest weapon. His name was Sylphan, and he had been their master assassin for over 2 centuries. He had killed the leaders of entire species. He had ended wars with a single blade thrust. He had eliminated beings so dangerous that their names were forbidden to speak. Sylphan was not like other assassins. He was patient, intelligent, and completely without mercy. He had studied every species in the galaxy, learning their weaknesses, their fears, their ways of thinking. When he accepted a mission, the target was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. "The humans have become a problem," Krelinox said as he stood before the ancient killer. Sylphan was tall and thin, with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed with inner fire. "They have killed 42 of our people in 2 missions. This cannot continue." Sylphan had been watching the reports with great interest. These humans were indeed different from other species. They did not break under pressure. They did not surrender when outnumbered. They fought with a combination of intelligence and savagery that he had never seen before. "I will go to their homeworld," Sylphan said in a voice like grinding metal. "I will eliminate their military leadership. Without commanders, their fleets will be useless." Earth's orbital defense station was humanity's greatest achievement. Built in the years after first contact, it protected the homeworld from any threats that might come from space. The station was armed with the most advanced weapons humans could build, and it was commanded by the best officers in their fleet. Admiral Susan Blake was a woman who had earned her position through 20 years of hard service. She was tall and strong, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in the colony wars, the pirate conflicts, and the border disputes that had shaped human expansion into space. "Admiral," called her aide, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. Amy had been transferred to Earth after the incident on the Aurora, and she had quickly become one of Susan's most trusted officers. "We're getting reports of alien ships in the outer system. They're too far away to identify, but they're definitely not friendly." Susan studied the tactical display. Ever since the attacks on Captain Morrison and Governor Carter, Earth's defenses had been on high alert. She knew that more attacks were coming, and she was determined to be ready. "How's our security holding up?" she asked. "Tony Mitchell's people have been working around the clock," Amy reported. Tony had been promoted to Chief of Security after his success on New Denver. He was a careful man who understood that the aliens were far more advanced than humans. He set up detection grids throughout the station. "If anything gets aboard, we'll know about it." What they didn't know was that Sylphan was already there. He had infiltrated the station 3 days earlier using technology that was beyond human understanding. He moved through the corridors like a ghost, studying the layout, learning the routines, planning his attack. The master assassin had been impressed by human engineering. Their station was well designed, with multiple backup systems and clever defensive positions. But he had infiltrated much more secure facilities than this. It was only a matter of time before he found the perfect moment to strike. Admiral Blake was in her office late at night, reviewing fleet deployment reports. The room was quiet except for the hum of the station systems. She was alone, just as Sylphan had planned. The perfect opportunity had finally arrived. The assassin moved through the ventilation system like smoke, his advanced suit masking his presence from every sensor. He had killed hundreds of beings this way, appearing from nowhere to strike without warning. The human admiral would be dead before she even knew he was there, but as Sylphan prepared to drop into the office, something unexpected happened. The lights suddenly blazed to life, flooding the room with harsh illumination. Emergency alarms began to sound throughout the station. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Admiral Blake said calmly, looking up at the ventilation grate. "Security has been tracking you for the past 6 hours." Sylphan was stunned. No one had ever detected him before. How had these primitive humans managed to find him? He dropped through the grate anyway, landing in the office with his weapon ready. If stealth had failed, he would rely on speed and skill, but the room was not empty. Tony Mitchell stepped out from behind a hidden panel, his weapon aimed at the assassin's head. "You're not as invisible as you think," he said with a grim smile. The master assassin found himself facing 2 armed humans in a room that had been prepared as a trap. This was not how his missions were supposed to go. But he was still confident in his abilities. He had killed beings far more dangerous than these two. Sylphan moved faster than human eyes could follow, his blade whistling through the air toward Admiral Blake. But Susan was not a desk officer who had forgotten how to fight. She had been expecting this attack for days, and she was ready. She rolled away from the strike, her own weapon coming up to fire. The energy bolt missed the assassin by inches, but it forced him to change direction. Tony's shot was more accurate, catching Sylphan in the shoulder and spinning him around. "You studied us, but you didn't understand us," Susan said as she and Tony circled the wounded assassin. "We're not just soldiers, we're survivors. We've been fighting wars since before we could walk upright." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Shadow Guild's history. Sylphan was skilled beyond measure, but he was fighting in a prepared battlefield against enemies who had been planning for this moment. The humans had turned their own station into a weapon. Emergency doors slammed shut, cutting off escape routes. Security fields activated, disrupting the assassin's advanced equipment. The very air itself became a weapon as the humans controlled the environment around them. Lieutenant Commander Foster arrived with a full security team, surrounding the office with armed officers. "You're outnumbered," she called out. "Surrender now and you might live." Sylphan had never surrendered in his life. He fought with desperate fury, his blade cutting through furniture and walls as he tried to reach his targets. But the humans had planned for this too. The office was built to contain exactly this kind of battle. The fight lasted for 3 hours. Sylphan was faster and stronger than any human, but he was fighting an entire system designed to defeat him. Slowly, inevitably, the humans wore him down. His advanced suit was damaged, his weapons were depleted, and his body was bleeding from a dozen wounds. "It's over," Admiral Blake said as the assassin finally fell to his knees. "You're going to tell us everything about the Shadow Guild, every secret, every weakness, every plan." But Sylphan was not finished. With his last strength, he activated a hidden device in his suit. It was a signal beacon, calling for help from his guild. If he was going to die, he would at least warn them about what they were facing. The signal was intercepted by Dr. Kevin Wright, Earth's leading expert on alien technology. Kevin was a thin man with quick hands and a brilliant mind. He had been studying the captured assassin equipment for weeks, learning how it worked and how to defeat it. "Admiral," Kevin reported from his laboratory, "the assassin just sent a message to his people, but I managed to trace the signal." "I know where it went," Susan Blake smiled grimly. "Then we know where to find them." The interrogation of Sylphan took place in a secure facility deep within the station. The master assassin was held in a cell designed specifically for dangerous aliens, surrounded by guards and monitored by the best security systems humans could build. Dr. Wright led the questioning, using a combination of technology and psychology to break through the assassin's conditioning. It was slow work, but Kevin was patient. He understood that the information they could gain was worth more than any weapon. "The Shadow Guild has 13 bases throughout the galaxy," Sylphan finally admitted after days of questioning. "Each one trains assassins for specific types of missions. Each one has weaknesses that can be exploited. The captured assassin revealed everything: the guild's structure, their methods, their plans for dealing with humanity. But most importantly, he revealed their greatest secret: they were afraid. "You are not like other species," Silthan said, his voice filled with something that might have been respect. "Other beings fight to survive. You fight to win. You do not accept defeat, even when it is certain. This makes you more dangerous than any weapon we have faced." Admiral Blake studied the intelligence reports that Kevin had compiled. The Shadow Guild was vast and well organized, but they were not invincible. They had weaknesses, and now humanity knew what they were. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "It's time to take the fight to them." The news of Silthan's capture spread through the Shadow Guild like wildfire. Their greatest assassin, the killer who had never failed a mission, had been defeated by the same humans they had dismissed as weak and primitive. Guild Master Kralonox stood in the council chamber, surrounded by the other leaders of their organization. President Angela Reed stood in the emergency session of the Earth Defense Council, her face grim as she looked at the assembled military leaders. The reports from the 3 failed assassinations had reached every major government on Earth, and the message was clear: humanity was at war whether they wanted it or not. Angela was a small woman with silver hair and steel in her voice. She had led Earth through the colony expansion and the first contact protocols, but this was different. This was about survival. "They've tried to kill our people 3 times, she said to the council. "They've failed each time, but they won't. Stop. The Shadow Guild has spent 3,000 years terrorizing the galaxy, and now they've decided we're their next target." General Robert Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces, spread intelligence reports across the table. "Madame President, we have locations for 13 Shadow Guild bases. Thanks to the information we got from their captured assassin, we know their structure, their methods, and their weaknesses." Angela studied the reports. The Shadow Guild was vast, with facilities spread across dozens of star systems. They had resources, technology, and experience that humanity could not match. But they also had something humanity had learned to exploit: they were not used to being hunted. "What do you recommend, General?" she asked. "We don't fight them like a traditional enemy," Robert replied. "We fight them like the terrorists they are. We hit their bases, destroy their training facilities, and eliminate their ability to operate. We make them afraid to leave their hiding places." Colonel Steve Martinez had been listening quietly from his seat at the end of the table. He was a lean man with dark hair and scars on his hands from years of combat. He commanded Earth's Special Forces, the men and women who handled the missions that regular soldiers could not. "Madam President," Steve said, "give me 50 of my best people and the new stealth ships. We'll show these assassins what real predators look like." Angela nodded. "Operation Nightfall is approved. Colonel Martinez, you have full authority to conduct strikes against Shadow Guild facilities." "General Hayes, I want our fleets ready to support these operations, and I want every human colony on alert." The first target was the Shadow Guild training facility on Zarian Prime. The base was hidden on the dark side of a moon, protected by shields and defensive systems that had kept it safe for centuries. Over 500 young assassins were trained there each year, learning the arts of stealth, infiltration, and murder. Captain Steve Martinez commanded the stealth ship Phantom as it approached the moon. The vessel was humanity's newest design, built specifically for operations like this. It was small, fast, and nearly invisible to most sensors. More importantly, it was crewed by people who understood that this was not just a military mission, it was a statement. "Target acquired," reported his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Ryan Clark." Ryan was a young man with quick reflexes and a talent for destruction. "I'm reading defensive shields, automated turrets, and what looks like a small fleet of patrol ships." Steve smiled grimly. "They're not expecting us." "That's our advantage." The assault began at dawn, local time. The Phantom launched a spread of missiles that overwhelmed the base's defenses in the first 30 seconds. But the real attack came from the strike team that Steve led personally. 50 human commandos hit the facility from 6 different directions. They moved through the complex like ghosts, but unlike the Shadow Guild, they were not there to hide. They were there to destroy everything they found. The young assassins in training had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to practicing on targets that could not fight back. When armed humans burst through their doors, firing weapons and throwing explosives, they panicked. "Secure the data cores," Steve ordered as his team moved through the facility, "and plant charges on everything that looks important." Sergeant Lisa Parker was Steve's demolitions expert, a small woman with steady hands and a talent for making things explode. She moved through the complex, placing charges on training equipment, computer systems, and structural supports. Everything the Shadow Guild had built here would be rubble within the hour. The few adult assassins at the facility tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Humans had learned their tactics from the captured prisoners, and they knew how to counter them. The Guild's stealth technology was useless against enemies who expected it. "Base secured," Steve reported as his team regrouped at the landing zone. Behind them, the facility was burning. All targets destroyed, no human casualties. The destruction of the Zarium Prime facility sent shock waves through the Shadow Guild. For the first time in their history, one of their training centers had been completely destroyed. But that was only the beginning. The next target was a research facility on the asteroid Vega 7. This was where the Guild developed new weapons and studied the weaknesses of different species. Dr. Amanda Wright led the scientific team that analyzed the captured equipment, while Captain Joe Miller's Marines secured the facility. "Look at this," Amanda said as she examined the Guild's research files. She was a tall woman with blonde hair and a mind that could understand the most complex alien technology. "They have detailed studies on every species in the galaxy. Biological weaknesses, psychological profiles, cultural blind spots. Everything an assassin would need to know." Joe Miller was a solid man with gray hair and steady nerves. He had fought in 3 different wars before joining the Space Marines, and he knew the value of good intelligence. "What about humans?" he asked. Amanda scrolled through the files until she found the human section. What she saw made her angry. "They think we're weak. They think we're primitive. They think we can't fight back effectively." She looked up at Joe with fire in her eyes. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The research facility was destroyed, with the same efficiency as the training center. But more importantly, humanity now had access to the Shadow Guild's entire database. They knew the locations of every safe house, every supply depot, and every hidden base. Intelligence Officer Dan Cooper coordinated the campaign from Earth. He was a quiet man who had learned to speak 7 different alien languages. But his real talent was understanding how organizations worked. He studied the Shadow Guild's structure and found their weak points. "The Guild depends on secrecy," he explained to the strike team commanders. "They've never had to fight a war where their enemies knew where they were. We're going to use that against them." Operation Nightfall expanded into a galaxy-wide campaign. Human strike teams hit Shadow Guild facilities on 17 different worlds. Safe houses that had been hidden for centuries were destroyed in minutes. Supply depots that had supported assassin operations for decades were turned into smoking craters. Colonel Beth Rogers led the most daring assault of the campaign. Her target was the Shadow Guild's advanced training center on the dark world of Umbral. This was where the Guild's most skilled assassins learned their deadliest techniques. Beth was a tall woman with red hair and a reputation for getting impossible jobs done. She had trained half the Special Forces officers in the Earth military, and she understood that this mission was about more than just destroying a facility. "We're going after their elite trainers," she explained to her team. "The people who create the next generation of assassins. If we can eliminate them, we cripple the Guild's ability to replace their losses." The assault on Umbral was the largest human military operation since the Colony Wars. 3 stealth ships carried 150 commandos to the planet's surface. They landed in the middle of a storm, using the weather to mask their approach. The Shadow Guild's most secure facility was built into a mountain, with defenses that had never been tested in battle. The Guild's masters were confident that no enemy could reach them there. They were wrong. Beth's team, known as the Ghost Battalion, moved through the complex like death itself. They had studied every corridor, every room, every defensive position. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. "Target the command center first," Beth ordered as her team spread out through the facility. "Then the training halls. Leave the archives for last. We want that intelligence." The battle for Umbral lasted 6 hours. The guild's trainers fought with desperate skill, but they were facing an enemy that had learned from every previous encounter. The humans used their tactics against them, turning the assassins' own methods into weapons. When the smoke cleared, the Shadow Guild's most important training facility was destroyed. More than 200 of their most skilled instructors were dead. The archives that contained 3,000 years of assassination techniques were in human hands. "Mission accomplished," Beth reported as her team prepared to evacuate. "The Guild's leadership school is finished." Back on Earth, President Reed received the reports with satisfaction. In 3 months, Operation Nightfall had destroyed more Shadow Guild facilities than any enemy had managed in 3 millennia. But the real victory was not in the destruction, it was in the fear. "They're running," General Hayes reported. "Our intelligence shows Guild members abandoning their posts and going into hiding. They're afraid to operate openly." "Good," Angela replied. "Fear is something they understand. Now they know what it feels like to be hunted." Supreme Chancellor Zarkith of the Catherian Empire stood before the massive viewscreen in his throne room, watching the reports flood in from across the galaxy. For 3,000 years, the Shadow Guild had been his empire's greatest weapon. Now, in less than 6 months, the humans had destroyed half of their organization. Zarkith was an ancient being, tall and thin with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed with cold fire. He had ruled the Empire for over 2 centuries, and he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not just defeating the Shadow Guild, they were hunting them to extinction. "Your Excellency," said his aide, a nervous creature with 4 arms and a trembling voice, "the Guild is requesting immediate reinforcement. They say they cannot continue operations without support." Zarkith turned from the screen, his face twisted with anger. "The Guild has failed. They promised me that the humans would be eliminated, quickly and quietly. Instead, they have created a war that threatens the stability of the entire empire." The truth was worse than Zarkith wanted to admit. The humans had not just defeated the Shadow Guild, they had learned from them. Human strike teams were now operating throughout the galaxy, using guild tactics and technology to hunt down the surviving assassins. The hunters had become the hunted. Deep in the Void Nebula, hidden from all sensors and detection systems, stood the Shadow Guild's ultimate sanctuary. The Fortress of Shadows was a massive space station that had been built over centuries. It was their final refuge, the place where their most important leaders and deadliest assassins gathered when all else failed. Guild Master Krelinox walked through the corridors of the fortress, his 4 arms trembling with rage and fear. Around him, the surviving members of his organization prepared for what they all knew would be their final battle. The humans had found them. "How?" demanded Commander Zextel as he studied the tactical displays. "How did they locate this place?" "We have hidden here for over 1,000 years." The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kevin Wright's voice echoed through the fortress's communication system, speaking in perfect guild language. "We learned from your own people," he said calmly. "Every assassin we captured, every facility we destroyed, every piece of technology we studied. You taught us everything we needed to know." Admiral Susan Blake commanded the human fleet that surrounded the fortress. 12 ships, each one built specifically for this mission. They were not the largest vessels in human space, but they were the most advanced. Every lesson learned from fighting the Shadow Guild had been built into their design. "All ships report status," Susan ordered from the bridge of her flagship, the Retribution. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for months, and they knew that the entire galaxy was watching. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the second wave of the attack. His ship, the new Aurora, was positioned to cut off any escape routes. He looked at the massive fortress on his screen and remembered the night when the first assassin had tried to kill him. That seemed like a lifetime ago. "Admiral Blake," Jake called over the communication link. "The fortress is powering up weapons. They're going to fight." Susan nodded grimly. She had expected this. The Shadow Guild would not surrender easily. They had too much pride, too much fear of what would happen if they were captured alive. "All ships, prepare for battle. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species that has lived in fear of these killers." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Shadow Guild's fortress was armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets, but the humans had learned to counter them. They moved like wolves, attacking from multiple directions. Using the nebula's gases and radiation to hide their movements, Colonel Beth Rogers led the boarding parties that struck the fortress directly. Her Ghost Battalion had been training for this assault for months, studying every captured piece of Shadow Guild technology, every architectural plan they had recovered from destroyed facilities. "Remember," Beth told her troops as they prepared to board the fortress, "these people have terrorized the galaxy for 3,000 years. Today, we end that terror forever." The assault was swift and brutal. Human Marines poured through the fortress corridors, fighting with a determination that the Shadow Guild had never encountered. The assassins were skilled, but they were facing enemies who had learned from every previous battle. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster led a strike team to the fortress's command center. She had been there at the beginning when the first assassin had tried to kill Captain Morrison. Now she was part of the team that would end the Shadow Guild forever. "Target the main computer core," Amy ordered as her team fought through the fortress's defenses. "We need those records intact." The Shadow Guild's leaders made their final stand in the fortress's heart. Guildmaster Krillanox and his remaining commanders fought with desperate skill, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The humans had learned their tactics, countered their technology, and broken their spirit. When the smoke cleared, the Shadow Guild's 3,000-year reign of terror was over. Their fortress was in ruins, their leaders were dead or captured, and their surviving members were scattered across the galaxy. But the real victory was not in the destruction. It was in the message it sent. The news of the Shadow Guild's defeat spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had lived in fear for millennia suddenly realized that their oppressors were gone. The empire that had ruled through terror was suddenly exposed as weak and vulnerable. Supreme Chancellor Zarkith received the reports in his throne room, his face pale with shock and fear. The Shadow Guild was destroyed. The fortress was gone. The humans had done what no other species had managed in 3,000 years. They had broken the Empire's greatest weapon. "Your Excellency," his aide said with a trembling voice, "we are receiving communications from 17 different star systems. They are declaring independence from the Empire. They say they will no longer bow to our rule." Zarkith knew that. This was only the beginning. Without the Shadow Guild to maintain order through fear, the Empire would collapse. Species after species would rebel, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. But worse than the rebellion was the fear of what the humans might do next. They had proven that they could not be intimidated, could not be easily killed, and would not surrender. If they decided to come after the Empire itself, who could stop them? The answer came 3 days later. Admiral Susan Blake's image appeared on every communication screen in the Catherian Empire. She spoke in clear, simple words that every species could understand. "People of the galaxy," she said, her voice calm but firm, "the Shadow Guild is no more. For 3,000 years, they have killed your leaders, terrorized your families, and kept you living in fear. That fear ends today." Susan paused, looking directly into the camera. "But let me be clear. Humanity did not do this to rule over you. We did this because we believe that all intelligent beings have the right to live free from fear. The choice of how to govern yourselves is yours to make." The message was broadcast to every world in the Empire, and the response was immediate. Planet after planet declared independence. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight back. The empire that had ruled through terror was crumbling. Supreme Chancellor Zarketh made his decision. In his throne room, surrounded by the symbols of 3,000 years of power, he composed the message that would end the Catherian Empire's dominance of the galaxy. To the humans of Earth, he said, his voice breaking with fear and shame. The Catherian Empire formally surrenders. We acknowledge that we have been defeated, and we beg for mercy. We will withdraw from all occupied territories. We will release all enslaved species. We will never again threaten humanity or any other species. The surrender was broadcast across the galaxy, and the celebration began immediately. Billions of beings who had lived under the Empire's rule suddenly found themselves free. The Shadow Guild was gone, the Empire was broken, and the galaxy was finally safe. Admiral Jake Morrison received the surrender message aboard the Aurora, the same ship where the war had begun. He thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment, from that first assassination attempt to the final victory. Signal Earth, he ordered. Tell them the war is over, tell them we won. But even as he spoke, Jake knew that the real victory was not in defeating the Shadow Guild or breaking the Empire. The real victory was in showing the galaxy that even the most dangerous enemies could be defeated if people were willing to fight for what was right. President Angela Reed stood before the Earth Defense Council, reading the final reports from the war. The Shadow Guild was destroyed, the Empire had surrendered, and humanity had emerged as one of the galaxy's most respected species. The war is over, she announced to the assembled leaders. But our work is just beginning. We have shown the galaxy that terror and oppression can be defeated. Now we must help build something better in their place. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to accept defeat. When pushed to the edge, humans did not break.